So I've been asked to liven up the audience a little bit. And so to do that, we're actually going to watch a video. This is a very, very important video. So I'd like all of you to please give it your undivided attention.
It's just, there's all this pressure, you know? And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me. And I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head. And it's relentless. And I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
See, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See, you're
out.
not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just, sometimes it's like, there's this achy, I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
Yeah, that sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Oh, come on. If you would just...
Don't.
It's all right. I'm not going to get kicked out. So why did I want to show that video? How does this video relate to what we've been talking about today? Any ideas? It's okay. Don't be nervous. You can have it. What is it not about? It's not about the money. That's what we heard, I think, if I remember, like the very first thing out of Susie's mouth. It's not about the money. We don't do this for money. We do this for people. We're people. We want to help people. That's why we do what we do. And so some of the observations that I've just had today, it's not about the money. Money is emotional. And emotions, they drive our actions. They drive our behaviors. And that's what we really want to try to help people, is to have the right behaviors. And it takes a village. There is no one of us that's going to do it. We all do this collectively. We work together. And that's why I'm excited about the panel that we have today. This panel represents just different stakeholders, ways that we can work together collectively to try to help pull that nail out without talking about the nail, if you will. And so just to kind of level set, the name of the session is Meeting Financial Wellbeing Needs of Financially Vulnerable Workers. That wasn't the original title. The original title was Meeting the Financial Needs of Low Income Workers. But what do we know is true when it comes to financial vulnerability?
All of us.
This is all of us. It's not just the low income, it's all of us. And so that's why we quickly changed that name to Financially Vulnerable. And that's what we're going to talk about today. John, if we can go ahead and pull up the next slide here. This is, for those of you who, my name is Greg Ward. I'm the think tank director at Financial Wellness. What is my title? I'm the think tank director of financial well-being at Financial Finesse, something like that. That's not what's important. What is important, just disclosure, we're a financial coaching company. That's kind of what we do at Financial Finesse. And if you'll give me the next slide here. We're talking about financially vulnerable people. We probably all have a kind of a slightly different definition of who is financially vulnerable. The way that Financial Finesse kind of defines it, and I apologize, for some reason our marketing department does not use widescreen slides like everybody else in the universe. So that's probably why it doesn't look very great. But we measure financial wellness on a 1 to 10 scale, very similar to what a lot of you do on your own to measure wellness. And we would recognize that if someone has a financial wellness score below 3, we would say that individual is in crisis. It could be a food scarcity, it could be housing shortages. These are very desperate situations. And right now, about 4% of employees that have completed an assessment through our platform fall into that category right now. And then the next category, what we would call struggling. Now, they may not be in fear of eviction, but they're still living paycheck to paycheck. And we've all seen the statistics. Even households making $250,000, I think it's something like 25% of those households live paycheck to paycheck. And we know the problem of living paycheck to paycheck. You're just one unplanned event away from having to either tap into your 401k or have other reasons. And what's that number say? 52%. So 56%, almost 60% of the workforce, again, these are people that have taken the assessment through our platform, kind of fall into a category that I would classify as financially vulnerable. So if you go to that next slide, what we found interesting in the research that we published earlier this year is it's kind of the tale of two worlds out there. When you think about financially vulnerable, the world they're in right now, it's a higher cost of living, interest rates are higher, difficulty getting into a home if they don't already own a home, rent is more expensive. And so you have financially vulnerable individuals who are feeling a lot of financial stress. And then you've got those that are maybe a little bit more financially secure who own assets. And so they've seen their housing values have gone up, their 401k values went up. I don't know if you've looked at your 401k recently, but mine, I think, is near its all-time high as far as the value. So people who have assets are actually have done well, and those who don't kind of continue to struggle. And if you go to the next slide, we talk about financial resilience in terms of having an emergency fund, being able to pay your bills on time. And you can just kind of see some of the statistics. Again, just going from 2022 to 2023, we see that there's still this lack of individuals that have an adequate emergency fund. I know we kind of talked a little bit about whether it's $1,000 1 month or 3 months of expenses. Enough to cover an unplanned expense, I think, is an appropriate amount. And then the last slide here, again, we're a financial coaching organization, and we've seen tremendous success, as we've heard kind of shared earlier, when you make financial coaching available. Financial coaching, as some of you have talked about, it kind of does cover both that emotional side. We talk about having emotional intelligence. How many of you EQ, something you're familiar with? And yeah, I have to admit, I kind of like it when Susie said, you want your financial coach to be able to model the things that they're asking people to do. And we think that's a great idea. And that includes being able to have that emotional intelligence in order to be able to connect with individuals. And you can kind of see, again, this is just from our own data set, when our coaches are engaging with individuals, we're having tremendous success. But as we know, the challenge is sometimes it's getting them to engage. And we talked about a lot of these things today. And so I just wanted to share some of that just to kind of level set the conversation. If we're talking about vulnerable individuals, it's important for us to know who those individuals are, and how can we best help them given what the current economic circumstances are today. So joining me on today's panel, I'm just going to go from nearest to furthest. Chris Hines is Program Manager of Income Advance. You're going to talk more about what that is, and that's through Rhino Foods Foundation. Next to Chris is Rochelle Gorey, and she is founder and CEO of Spring4, and we'll hear more about Spring4. And at the end, we heard Devin's name mentioned earlier. I have a question already lined up for you. Devin Miller is CEO of Secure Save, and so I'll welcome all three of you to the panel. I'm just going to start, Chris, with you talking about Income Advance through the Rhino Foods Foundation. Would like to hear from you a little bit more of the origin story. Like what is it that created that need? What is it that Income Advance is doing to help vulnerable workers, and any results that you can share as it relates to it?
Sure. Awesome. I think the next slide, yeah. Our origin story is an interesting one. The foundation itself, we're pretty new. We started in 2018, but we're connected to a company, Rhino Foods, the proper company. Majority of people probably haven't heard of us, but you've probably tried our products. We are an ice cream inclusion company that makes all the cookie dough for Ben & Jerry's ice cream. So solid.
You get some ice
there, right?
cream.
Yeah.
You get some ice cream.
And we've grown to have a pretty hefty size of the market share. But where our ethos really focuses on is focusing on impacting the manner in which business is done. Our CEO and founder, or former CEO, now it's moved over to his son, Ted, started the family business in the 80s. And yes, cookie dough is our means for profitability and our means for revenue. But where Ted and his family really focus on is how to drive impact through workforce programming. He started doing open book management in the 90s, created an inclusive hiring strategy in the early 2000s, has an employee exchange program. We're focusing on sharing our seasonal employees with local businesses that have a different demand time frame for the year, so no one has to go on unemployment or anything. And then also created what's called this income advance program. It's essentially a employer-sponsored small dollar loan program, and it started out of a lot of employees coming to Ted saying, hey, in the early 2000s, saying, hey, my car broke down, or hey, I need a loan, I need an advance on my paycheck. And Ted was granting some of those out of his pocket, but the scale got so large, and then unconscious bias started to come in, right? Where it was maybe there was more decisions from him because he's their boss, a little bit more from employees he doesn't know quite as well. So in 2007, he attended a United Way Working Bridges conference. And there he was really thinking of that idea. How do I make a sustainable solution that is helping folks in a financial emergency situation? And happened to get connected with a local credit union, North Country Federal Credit Union. And they really thought about this idea of, we have the employees, Rhino has the employees, and we know there's the growing need of a loan type program, a safe loan type program. North Country was like, well, that's our whole jam, right? We're doing personal lending all the time. So why don't we create kind of this dual stakeholder approach where you can refer employees to us, and then we can figure out the loans with them. So in 2013, 2007, 2013 was really starting to grow some momentum around this program. And when we became a B Corp in 2013, it really took off. It was really kind of our bread and butter for getting us that certification, as well as our other impact workforce programs. But it's really started to now take it from a Rhino conversation to a more global conversation. We've actually had a lot of employers come to us and say, we're seeing the same problem. Can we have some support in implementing this program? And throughout, after 2013, it was mostly Ted, who was CEO at the time, or our director of people and culture, that was working with these companies that were approaching Rhino, but it was never fully their purview, right? They were really focused on their X's and O's of their job. So in 2018, we actually started the foundation, which is solely focused on expanding not only the income advance, but being kind of a drop-in point for employers to say, hey, we have this challenge. Can you help us ideate some solutions? And we'll talk about what's worked for us. And maybe income advance is a good solution, or something in that space of supporting employees deeper than just a paycheck, and really understanding that our employees are our number one asset. So the program's grown. Where we think about income advance, I think it's really important to understand the why outside of just the X's and O's. Yes, there's the framework, which I'll go over in a second. But where income advance we really wanted to focus on is really four main pillars. It's accessibility and inclusivity, affordability, transparency and fairness, and then long-term impact as well. We really want to see this program as not a payday loan, or not an earned wage access product, not a product that is maybe a short-term Band-Aid fix, but how do we build more long-term impact? And the way the program is set up right now, it's grown to over 100 companies in Vermont. We've helped really push it out to there. It's grown to over $2 million in loans over the past year, which affected about 1,400 employees. And it's all it's a little bit different based on who the financial institution is and who the business is. So at the base framework, the way it's set up is it is a dual stakeholder approach, employee, financial institution. It's a $2,000 max loan that is capped at the interest. This is all that we advocate for. Obviously, it can differ based off of employer to financial institution, but it's $2,000, up $2,000 loan, capped APR at 20%. That is paid back over 6 to 12 months. No questions asked loan. And I think the most important part of this, it's a no credit check loan. How a company determines, or how a financial institution determines risk of these, is through the employer sponsored. So if an employee is in good standing, based off of how each relationship wants to define that term, is how an employee can get access to that loan, available within 24 hours. But we intentionally leave it really open because we want to support the employer and the financial institution, get them in a room talking and designing a program together, because we see that it's worked in Vermont, and now we just want to scale it from there. So
Awesome.
Yeah.
I got 2 more slides for you. Do you want to?
Yeah, if you want to just go to the next one, sure. So that's our impact. And then if you go one more over, actually, that really touches upon the 4 pillars of Income Advance, our program framework. One part that I left out was the long-term impact side. So where it's seen as a short-term fix, maybe for folks, where say your car broke down, $700 fix, get that loan, great. Where we want it to grow to, and what I think is the bread and butter at Rhino as well, is folks are paying it out of payroll deduction. Say your 12 months is up, loans paid back. We actually keep that $40 coming out of a paycheck, and it goes into a savings account. So we're building on that emergency savings down the line. And to understand kind of the user of folks, I think we often get put into a box of who's using these programs. We have a lot of managers using these programs. We have a lot of folks that see this opportunity to build their credit outside of needing an emergency. Maybe there's no other place to turn to really bring up their credit. And it's gotten individuals into mortgages. It's gotten individuals into car loans, other loans. And the goal is not to have people take Income Advance over and over and over. It's the entry point to qualify for a loan that's a lower interest rate, and then a lower interest rate. And we're pushing away people from turning to things like payday loans, where it's 300, 400% APR. So hopefully this is a solution. And the benefits you can see up there, but it's really focused on access to emergency loans for employees, building healthy relationships with a credit union, really financial institution, building savings, increasing credit. And then employers, we've talked about it all day, right? The increased productivity, the lower the employee stress from outside, and hopefully be deeper than a paycheck for folks. Yeah.
I love that. That's the goal, right? It's someone said it just a moment ago. It's a journey. It's not an event. So, taking the circumstances that someone's in and being able to address that kind of need and that issue in that moment, but then advancing, that's the phrase, I suppose, or income advance. We want to advance their financial well-being. Speaking of meeting their needs, Rochelle, our organizations recently got married in some form or fashion. That's probably not the best analogy, so I apologize for that. But then again, it's about the nail for me. So, but tell us about Spring4. It brings resources to bear in the marketplace. So if you can kind of share a little bit, you founded this organization, so you must obviously seen a need out there. So if you don't mind talking a little bit about that, and then just what is it and how is it helping address needs of the financially vulnerable?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. I started the company all the way back in 2005. And the reason that we started Spring4 is that we really understand that when people are having financial hardship or challenges, something's going on in their lives that makes it impossible for them to, pay their, mortgage, their rent, their credit card, their auto, not be putting money into retirement or savings funds. So what we wanted to do is really connect people with the resources that we knew existed in their very own communities that could help them address the why or the root cause behind that underlying financial challenge. And it's so exciting to be here today to be in this employer space. Typically, Spring4 has worked really primarily in the financial services space. And we have a lot of clients that are, very large national banks, credit unions, fintech, online consumer lenders, and more we've been working with employers. And so we're happy to see that employers are really understanding that when they can extend care and show support and assistance for their employees, that it's good for the employees, but it's also good for their company. So, taking a step back, we really believe that if you connect people to those resources, we will get people paying and saving again. And that's what we've been doing since 2005. And I'm also super glad that we changed the title of this workshop, because really it is, so many of us are financially vulnerable. Recently, I saw a stat that nearly 40% of all families earning $200,000 a year are living paycheck to paycheck. And I think when I started Spring 4 all the way back in 2005, it really was a notion that, this help was needed for low and moderate income families. And our journey at Spring 4 is bigger than the products and what we're doing, at the individual and the company level. And that is to remove the stigma that is associated with financial hardship, because at any day, at any moment, something can happen to any of us, whether it be a car breaking down, a medical emergency, a divorce, something, an unexpected trip to the ER that puts us at risk for financial hardship. So that's what we're doing. And how we do that is we have created a platform of, you can go to the next slide, I think, over 23,000 vetted and curated financial health resources. When I talk about financial health resources, what I mean is tangible connections and resources to nonprofit and government resources in 30 different spending categories. So if you think about your household budget and all the things that you're doing and paying for, we have resources at the community level that can help reduce those household costs and expenses so that people can get cash flow back into their budget again and begin to either pay back past due bills or put money into retirement or savings. So anything from food savings to utility costs to student loan counseling, financial counseling. We've seen an increase in rental resources and mental health resources recently. So we're making those resources available to people so that they can get back on track. And the way that we do that is through, our platform of products. So we have, for employers, we have a digital self-service tool that employees can access this information and nobody needs to know about it. And I think we've heard that a lot today, that, why are employees not taking advantage of certain programs or benefits? Well, they're fearful, or they're not certain that, what they're going through is going to be held in confidence. They don't want anybody to know that they're struggling, like maybe they are behind on their mortgage, maybe they have excessive credit card debt, or they can't, they're behind on their auto loan. So we've created a really safe way for them to find resources in their own community. And why this is important is because, unfortunately, there's a lot of unscrupulous actors, predatory products out there that prey on people who have financial challenges. And so our team independently vets and curates all of the resources in our database. They're only nonprofit and government organizations so that people can get the help that they need and deserve. And we're just really excited about the journey that we're on. In Q2, we made over 2 million referrals to people in need. And the reason that we're working with so many companies is because we are a way to demonstrate to your employees that you care about them. We help build trust. We help build engagement. When our products are released to communities and to people in need and employees, they're very, very highly utilized. People need this information. They want this information. When they get it, we've done tons of surveys. They feel supported. They feel appreciative of the entity that has provided the resources. And I just want to say one more thing, and that's that a lot of times, when we're talking with organizations about bringing Spring 4 on board, they sometimes get a little nervous and they're like, well, I don't know, how is that going to look if we're providing assistance, to our employees or to our customers? And my, sentiment back is like, well, what happens if you don't, right? So like, there's only good that comes from extending assistance and help and being there for your employees in time of need. So really excited that the financial health movement, if you will, I think we are a movement now, is really gaining traction, and that we all win when we make solutions available to our employees.
Yeah, I do want to go to the next slide because I want to point out just some of the categories. If you look on the
Oh,
right,
yeah.
and I apologize for, should fix that slide for you.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, so you can see our most common categories of requests, and number one is food savings. And so, you know, that to me says people are really hurting when you're needing to look, well, we all know food costs are extreme right now, but you know, when you're looking for ways to save money on your food bills, that means you're having some real financial hardships. So, and rental resources, employment resources. Now, if an employer utilizes Spring4, that's not a category that we typically see employers utilizing. So it is customizable. So.
Yeah, and as a financial coach, we have access to this. People that are in crisis. Imagine I'm a financial coach and a financial planner, and I'm talking to someone who's can't find housing. We've gotten phone calls from people who are living in their cars. They're employed, but they're living in their cars. So it empowers the coaches to be able to put in a zip code and to be able to immediately add over 23,000 different resources to get a curated list of resources within these 30 plus categories is an amazing value. Yeah, and it empowers us. And that's what I really want to emphasize is as a coach, I feel like we have an amazing toolbox, whether it's small employer loans, whether it's access to public and nonprofit resources, emergency savings that we're going to get to. These are the tools in the toolbox. And I'm a general contractor that can work with an individual to say, okay, let's make sure we're using the right tools for the right job. And you might, I don't know how many of you are handy around the home, but you know, I can help with a simple plumbing project. But if it's a very sophisticated one, I want to make sure they get to a plumber, and I want to help them find a good one. And that's what we do in the financial world, in the financial wellness world, is we have these tools. We want to get them utilized, but we realize in some instances, it might be for tax reasons or other reasons, we need to get them to a specialist, but let's get them to someone who's not predatory. You know what? Let's get them to a resource that truly has their best interest in mind. So we're going to jump ahead to Devin. Let's talk about Secure Save, emergency savings. We heard a lot about it. Out of plan, emergency savings program Susie was talking about earlier. Tell us about the program itself, the successes that you've seen. Why is it working? Why is it needed more now than ever?
Yep. If you go to the next slide, I have two slides. We're going to talk about, you know, a lot of discussion around emergency savings. I thought this is actually a great way to summarize some of that discussion of how do these programs actually look? How do they function? What are the, I would say, results from a mechanical standpoint? Like what happens to the dollars? What happens to the invitations and things like that? What type of employers set these up? How to design them? So I'll just give a bunch of bullet points around this. And then I'm actually going to show a slide that starts to try and unpack the return on investment. Why should employers do this? But at a high level, so yeah, all we do is emergency savings through the workplace. We work just to kind of some impact numbers on our own side. We just published these a few weeks ago for our birthday. It's our 4th birthday. So we're relatively new into this category, but we've helped about 50,000 people set up emergency savings accounts. They have saved around $50 million. Last month was our biggest month to date. And they have transacted they've had about 150,000 emergencies. And those numbers are growing, you know, multiples over a year right now. And so there's a lot of momentum in the category. One thing that makes us unique is that we work directly with employers, but also through partners at a variety of different ways. People like Voya, Truist are some examples. So banks, record keepers, things like that. But anyway, what these programs look like, number one, they're through the workplace. So this is a workplace program. You can't just go to Secure Save and sign up. You have to be invited to the program. Like a 401k or HSA, we work with the employers to design the program. Being out of plan, they could really think about, you know, which population they want to target. In some cases, they may have a subsidiary they want to launch with first. And what's been really amazing to watch, and we have a lot of data that helps support and encourage this and convince employers to do it, is 90% of the employers we work with offer some form of an incentive. And what we have been able to demonstrate is the impact of that incentive in a variety of ways. But as it was alluded to earlier, you can make a very big impact with a pretty nominal investment. On average, employers we're working with are providing maybe $100 to $150 per employee per year into these programs. And so when we set these all up, we work with the employer to design how the incentives are going to be delivered. Are they, a sign-up bonus, a milestone bonus per paycheck, or some combination of those? How much do they want to invest? Do they invest nothing? The employer does pay a administration fee. It's pretty similar to like a health savings account, depending on the size of the employer. But the employee pays absolutely nothing. We don't charge them for anything at any time. So that's designed, programs rolled out, and we get about a low 60% average adoption in that case. Obviously, it varies based on the incentive. We have employers that have higher incentives that are seeing 70 to 80% adoption, but even those that are spending $25 or $50 per employee per year are usually around 35, 40, 50%. We do have some 10% that don't have an incentive, and even in that case, they're still getting upwards of 20% adoption, and they're getting that because of just how clean and easy the product is. It's really all about emergency savings. It's payroll linked. It's very easy to sign up for. But so that's just the start. So very high adoption. What's been interesting about that adoption number to note, it does not degrade over time. And so as employees leave the company, they can still keep SecureSave. And so 40% of employees that leave SecureSave actually keep SecureSave, even though they've left the employer. And then when the new employee joins, that's replacing the old one, they adopt at the same rate. And so these programs tend to kind of grow organically in the number of accounts associated with them from the employer. And then from there, they don't really touch the money much. This is a topic, I appreciate David Johns bringing this up. We actually really leaned into the research that AARP has done over the years, and look forward to reading more of their work about what employees want into these programs. And there is a fine line of getting people to both use the dollars, but also not abuse the accounts. And we take a very positive and friendly kind of approach. It's their money. They can access it anytime. But for example, we don't have plastic. You have to go to the app to move the money around and access it. So we put a little bit of natural friction in there, and we work with a lot of behavioral scientists, and we have our own and really kind of focus on how to create the right usage dynamic. And so on the chart on the right, you see is actually what happens is that typically people are saving on their own $70 or $80 per month. The employer is putting in $10 to $20 per month. And so they're saving around just under $100 on average per month. But they're taking out usually 2 transactions a year. And Susie mentioned this, they're very specific dollar amounts, and they're not very large. Typically, it's less than half of their overall balance. And when they do take money out, they keep the automatic savings going, and they're staying in the program. And so on the bottom, you see that 95% of the employees a year later. So if the employee is still at the company, they are almost always still with SecureSave. A lot of the research that Ibri shared today, finding something that is free to the employee, very high adopting. This is also a very popular program, and we work with employers to measure popularity. We have a 94% customer satisfaction rating. We've measured 86 net promoter score. So it's very sticky. They like it. They're adopting at a high rate. They're using the dollars effectively. They're building their savings. And so it creates a very traceable financial well-being program. It's money in an account that people can see and they can touch and they can use and they can take with them. So the next slide, just last one. This is a collection of different research, and I know the source is going to be maybe hard to see, so feel free to grab us or me after the call, and I can share some of where we're pulling this. Some of this is our own, and a lot of it's from kind of the collective effort onto the movement that Rochelle called what we're all working on. But there's a lot of data that's demonstrating that the benefit of a workplace emergency savings program has a tangible ROI for the employer. And so I won't go through all of that. It's pretty self-explanatory even at the high level, but it's definitely impacting in areas employers talked about. So number one, it's very popular, high adopting, employees like it. It's very tangible to them. It's something they interact with. It's money in an account. And typically, again, with the employer incentive, it has this positive kind of reflection back on the employer. But we're seeing improvement in retention, improvement in retirement plans, improvement in productivity. And a lot of this data, because this category is fairly new, it's going to take several more years for the story to continue to come out. But as we talk with employers, they have nothing but positive things to report. And the last stat I'll give that's not on here, with all the employers we worked with over about 4 years now, we have a 95% retention rate of the employers on a lifetime basis. So once they deploy these programs, they look at the results, they look at the popularity, they look at the kind of the organic growth, like this is fantastic. And often it is one of the most utilized benefits that they've ever that they offer. So as a quick example, we did some research with Commonwealth and BlackRock on a very large healthcare provider that's a customer of ours. And we're doing a 2-piece research on this that showed the impact of how the program was designed and the results. And for this particular employer, tens of thousands of employees, they have over a 70% adoption. And only about 1 year in, it's pretty much one of, if not the most utilized benefit in the entire company. And so we're going to do another piece that really starts to talk about the ROI. So lots more to come in this category, but it's definitely an area that there's a lot of promise, and excited to be part of the conversation.
Awesome. So as a reminder, would love for you, if you have a question, to raise your hand, be part of the conversation. I don't want to do Susie wrong by not asking you.
What was her question?
Her question was, how do we make sure they're using it for like unplanned expenses as opposed to like a vacation or something that we would hope that they're planning?
Yeah, there's a very fine line. So emergency savings are, I often give the comparison that there's a lot of similarities, but it's apples to oranges to HSAs. HSAs are very restrictive. There's very tax advantage, but they also have very limited use, especially an FSA is even more restrictive. And I think those are good to keep people to use it the right way. Emergency savings are different. It's a very personal thing of what is an emergency.
Mhm.
I often give the analogy of like, if you go to buy shoes and you use your Secure Save account, you just might want more shoes. If I go buy more shoes, it might be because I work from home and I just don't have nice shoes and I have to go to a funeral and this is a family emergency, and you just never know how people think about these things. So you cannot restrict the access to these dollars. We also take a very positive, even to the name Secure. Our mission is to help people feel and be financially secure.
Yeah.
And we've talked all about the emotion of that today. So we take a very positive kind of approach to the product, and it's your money. You can access it any time. So we don't guilt people, but we do have these very purposeful friction things. Like, again, you don't have plastic. So we want you to not just be able to take a card out and swipe it. We want you to go to the app and think about it. We lean all in on the topic of emergency savings. So in the app, it's not a balance, it's your emergency savings.
Yeah.
It's not a transfer button. It's get emergency money. And when you go through that, we don't, Susie, I think the nomenclature just on the fly, I don't want to go off on what she said in a negative way, but it's definitely a softer, it's not, this is an emergency. Should you do this? For us, it's much more, what's the emergency you're dealing with?
Yeah.
But there is another kind of avenue there, which is, that's also a great opportunity. There's obviously some minor, but serious life event that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
We want to be able to understand that so that we can direct people. I think similar to what Rochelle is doing, finding the right resource at the right time. And so we're actually working to think about how, for example, if someone comes in and they have several $1,000s and they take the whole thing and they go through the app and they say that, this is for a legal matter. Well, something really wrong has happened in their life, right? And so if we see that, we might be able to direct them to a financial coach. Like, there might be more help that you need than just money right now, or a financial therapist. And so, we take a very behavioral science driven approach to this, very positive approach, but you have to really start with, what does that person want? They want access to these dollars quickly and easily.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on that, because I also think it's very important to understand, and probably everyone here does, but it's usually not just one thing that's getting in the way of being a financially healthy person, right? And I think that's one of the reasons our company has been so successful, is we have created a way for people to get access and resources to, 30 different spending categories, right? So it may be that you have a legal issue that then makes it impossible for you to pay your rent or to pay your car note, or so it's all combined. And what we see on average, people need about 6 to 8 referrals per visit to the Spring 4 offering. So it's really important that we design products and programs that can address all of the things that are going on in a person's financial life.
Good.
One thing too to add, we've noticed a similar thing too with the who's using the income advance loan. I think when we first started it, it was a lot more focused on folks that maybe fall into a low wage earning space, right? We actually are seeing quite the opposite of, yes, there are individuals who are more in the entry level space taking these loans, but we're seeing a lot more of people on our corporate side taking them as well. But one thing that we really push for is try to make it as anonymous as possible, where we don't require anyone to say why they're taking the loan, or actually it's just a form someone can fill out outside of HR, slide it under the door, and the HR person just sends it over to the credit union. Some employees really want to talk to us about it. Some employees don't, and that's totally fine because people are taking it for all sorts of means. But on top of it, there are some companies that pair the income advance loan with financial coaching, where if you take the income advance loan, you have to do this module or this program. We actually advocate against that because not everyone who is going through a financial emergency situation wants to take a class or go through a program. We say have it there as a resource, as potentially to use, but I think pairing the two is putting up an unneeded barrier right off the bat for requirements. So we try to keep it as anonymous and as open and as low barriered as possible for folks to come.
And I would also add or argue that often it's a lack of funds that cause these issues, not a lack of education or knowledge.
Totally.
If I don't have money in my bank account, what am I to do? It's not necessarily that I need to be coached or told to be on a budget. I just don't have the money in my account.
Exactly. Especially when we know there's 125 million Americans that don't, if they were faced with a $400 expense, couldn't cover it.
Yep.
So the scale of it's what, a third of over a third of our country is really in that financial precarious space where it's one expense away from losing your job, and then what compounds on top of that is really important. So that's why we want to take out as much bias as possible, provide as much support as we can, but understand that there's so many user needs.
Rodney.
I'll get the hang of the mic someday. Devin, quick question for you. I know Secure Save is out of plan benefit, but if I'm an employer and I'm thinking, hey, maybe I should do an in plan versus out of plan. Can you talk about the benefits of doing out of plan versus in plan?
Yeah. So one is out of plan is actually in the market for the most part. It's much easier to find. In plan, one of the flaws with in plan is it requires the record keepers to build and support that, and so it's a harder thing to be able to get into employers' hands. And we're not against in plan. I think it's just there are some structural challenges that are going to make it more. You're not going to see it as much in the market for a while, and I think obviously we'll continue to work on it as a group and as policymakers. So one difference is out of plan is available today. Any employer can launch it, whether you have a retirement plan or not, of any size. Another component is that there's just less administrative question marks around out of plan. I mean, ultimately, out of plan is essentially a banking product for consumers. Now, there are a lot of variations to out of plan still. Our general approach is we work with a variety of bank partners. We think that these should be loaded, ideally no cost to the employee. They should be in some principal protected, like an FDIC insured account. Should be an interest rate. Should be very accessible. Should be portable. All of those things can and should be true in an out of plan. The other thing is that within an out of plan, the way that it typically works, especially if you set it up the way that, as I just described, right? If it's no cost, if it's portable, if the employee can access it anytime, it's not actually really considered by our view and our attorney's view is an ERISA benefit. It's really just an alternative payroll schedule. Because if you think of what payroll is I'm going to pay you money and you can use it. You're going to get it in a regular interval and you can use it for whatever you want. That's essentially what the employers are doing with us. They're saying, we're going to pay you this money. We're going to put it over here on this interval and you can use it for whatever you want. And it's post-tax and there's no restrictions on it. It's really just, we've set up an alternative payroll schedule with a lot of behavioral science and kind of structure around it. And with that case, the employers are able to be much more tactical on how they deploy this. So I'll give you an example. There's an employer we work with here on the East Coast. They have 1,000 employees, and they have a very diverse workforce in kind of all ways you could think of that word. And they also have a diverse workforce in the fact that they've got different divisions. And so they've deployed multiple programs with different incentives at different times for different workers with different outcomes in mind that they're trying to create. And with in-plan, you can't do that. It basically has to mirror your retirement plan, and you have to fit within a very tight box. And with out-of-plan, you can really create the outcomes that you want to get. And for employers, that's important. And so anyway, there's a bunch of differences for you.
Good. Any other questions in the room? We did get a couple questions online. Emergency savings does seem to be a popular thing. So one question was just with respect to compensation levels and adoption rate.
Yeah, it's a super thick bell curve that doesn't really differ, I would say, very much, surprisingly. There are cliffs to it, though. But those cliffs are much broader than you would expect. So, for example, generally from the age of, mid-20s to late 50s, we see very consistent adoption rates. They don't differ more than a few percentage points between the ends of those. Once you get really young or much closer to retirement, it starts to, go down 10, 15, 20%. Same with income. If you're making 25 to 30,000 all the way up to, 150,000 to almost 200,000, we see pretty consistent adoption rates to what we talked about. They only differ by single-digit percentage points. But once you go well under that, I think generally those are people that maybe are part-time workers that they, income. They have kind of a different view of their job and income. Or if you're well over 200,000. I'll give you a quick example. One of the case studies on our website, Lee & Hayes, which is a fairly prominent, not to shout out another law firm as I sit in a law firm office, but sorry, Morgan Lewis, you could sign up too. But Lee & Hayes, great firm, but they have a 50+% adoption rate. But you got to remember who's in a law firm. It's a lot of paralegals and admin support and IT people. And in that particular case, that's who signed up for this program. And the lawyers, not so much. But so you see a lot of consistency across all of that.
Yeah, and one more question online was just with respect that there's generally high adoption of it, or at least it sounds like it. Other than incentives, is there anything else that seemed to be really driving that?
Yeah, incentives matter, but they are definitely not I'll put it reverse. We see solutions in the market that employers have where it's a bank or a credit union will come in and say, we'll help you launch an emergency savings program, and they'll even put money on the table. And sometimes it's considerable. Those programs almost always are low single-digit adoption. And it shows that incentives matter, but incentives alone kind of don't matter.
Yeah.
You have to have the payroll connection, the ease of sign up, the automation of the funds. And I think that behavioral science effort really does make a difference. So it's, incentives with everything else in place are going to be afterburners to a program. Incentives without any of that stuff in place is got to be pretty much a waste of money.
Well, we do have a couple more minutes, so I wanted to give each of you, I had a question from the young lady up here.
I do have a comment/question. So based on Devin, what you just said about thinking about emergency savings as an alternative payroll solution a little bit, we are in the middle of fielding an earned wage access study. And I know, Chris, you've done a lot of work on earned wage access. So just in some preliminary stats, I just looked at it. For those that do pull the earned wages before they get their payroll, they are using it at least once a week. So the majority are using it at least once a week. They're taking out at least $50. And the primary reasons are for food, rent, or housing. So food, number one, rent, housing, number two. And then they're doing this to avoid a bank overdraft or to avoid borrowing from their friends and family. So I know there's a little bit of a discussion that could be had about meeting short-term, very near-term liquidity needs versus a longer-term emergency savings program. So I was hoping, Chris, you could chime in about your research that you've done on earned wage access and a little bit even about maybe payday loans and where the income advance fits in and how emergency savings, if you could explain a little bit more about that framing of payroll innovation.
Sure. Yeah. Preliminary research for sure. And I think it's important to distinguish when we're talking about earned wage access is the why somebody is taking earned wage access. Is it because of an emergency expense? Could be, and also could also start that proverbial hamster wheel, right? Say somebody makes $1,500 and gets slapped with a $500 expense on a Monday. Access the earned wage access to cover that. You get your $500. You get paid on Friday. You only get $1,000 in that check. But say rent is $1,200 on that Friday. Suddenly, maybe you have to take your next earned wage access, and it's creating always this catch up. So where earned wage access, I think, can be great is in the sense of a non-emergency situation where somebody might want to get their earned wage access, put it in something like an emergency savings account. Where income advance comes into play, I think, is how the loans are amortized over 6 to 12 months typically. So compared to that $500 being taken out your next payday, it is spaced out over 6 to 12 months. So it's only $40 coming out. Now you can cover that $1,200 expense that's coming on Friday that you're already planning for, and you're not having to take another like earned wage access or another loan or another situation, or turn to payday lending, where similar type, really fast moving repayment, but with fees, with how fast it's paid back, you're looking at APRs of over 390%, 400%. And that's why we advocate and put we call it right out 20% max APR. And I think people buck back at, oh, it's a social impact program. Why isn't it a 0% APR? And in reality, we want to create a sustainable solution. So we have to play within the game, but we don't want it to run away on APR or interest, with the idea that a lot of places it's around 17%. It's placed just above where if you went in with a very low credit score, you would get a really high space. So it's in a competitive space. But
yeah, one thing that was interesting this morning at one of the panels, I think somebody, it was the host, asked, like, what was something you do in your life that really you recommend? I can't remember the exact question, but everybody said automate my savings. Mm-hmm. And here we are in a group of, we're in a financial, well-being symposium. I hope everybody says that, because it is really the fundamental thing. But for the average person out there, they don't do that. They don't think they can. I think David John even explained it. Someone who's very educated knows that it could not find the place to go do it. And ultimately, what we're trying to help people do, and what payroll-linked emergency savings programs do, is help people do the thing that they know that they should do, but they just don't have the mental space, the time, the energy. I love the bulldozer example. Like, I got home, I'm running a truck all day. I'm not going to go onto my payroll system and do this. And so we have to make it easy and automated for people to do the thing they know that they want to do. And that's ultimately what a payroll-linked emergency savings program is. But once you get them started, then that positive snowball effect will occur. They get addicted to it, they move, and hopefully they're going to end up in a place where they don't need these types of loans and things like that.
Totally. And one thing I just want to add, I know we're just sped up on time, but a real quick employee anecdotal side was when I first started, I worked on our batter team to kind of learn about the inner workings. And I asked one of the guys, Bob, who 72-year-old guy, absolute workhorse. But I asked him why he likes Rhino. And he went right into, well, I'm a felon and Ted took a chance on me, so I have loyalty here. But also, it alleviates my anxiety having the employee exchange program, so I don't have to explain my history to an employer. And then he said, on top of it, my truck broke down. I live 45 minutes from here, and I wasn't totally sure how this was going to work. I thought I was going to lose my job. Well, we have the income advance loan. Fast forward 4 years, he goes back in saying, oh, my truck needs work. I don't necessarily have the money for this. Can I take another income advance loan? Goes into the credit union and they say, you have $4,500 in a savings account that he had no idea he was paying into, to where he could upgrade his truck, go see his grandkids, and just go right from there. And that's where I think we get into the long-term impact of this is, yes, it fixes things in the short term, but in reality, we're building capacity, we're building empowerment in a financial system for folks that may have been marginalized for a long time. So,
well, we have a legal question here. Oh, look at the time. Maybe next time I'll give this one to you so you can answer it offline. But Barb, we appreciate the opportunity to thank our panel and